Yes, good morning. It is Thursday, the 23rd of July, 2020. Welcome back to the Best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. My name's Pete Fairbairn. I'm your host. The show's pretty simple. It's 5 big stories happening in the world of sport, and I get a different journalist from around the country on with me every morning to discuss them and provide some additional insight, perhaps some mail that they have on some of these stories as well. Today, I'm joined by Brad Walter from NRL.com. How are you, mate?
I'm going good, Pete. How are you? Plenty happening.
Mate, I'm going very well. You're absolutely bang on. There's heaps happening. And just for a change, there's plenty happening in the sport that you cover exclusively, the NRL, and we will get there. But being so clued up on all the other sports, I'm going to get your take on a few different other things as well. Mate, let's rip straight into it. I'm going to start in the AFL with a story in the Herald Sun today from John Ralph and Rebecca Williams, looking at the AFL unveiling a 20-day football frenzy and how that kind of impacts from a broadcast perspective. So to take things back for a second, the fixture for rounds 9 to 12 will see 33 games of AFL football played in the next 20 days as part of a fairly unprecedented fixture cram. But what Ralph and Rebecca Williams have managed to do is get Channel 7 Melbourne Managing Director Lewis Martin on the record, and they've also managed to get Fox Footy General Manager Michael Neal on the record, talking about the potential impact of having primetime premium games of football on every day of the week, and whether this is something that we might see more of even in years to come when the fixture returns to normal. What do you think, mate? Is this a bit of a preview of the future, and do you think we'll see more midweek AFL fixturing even when life does return to normal?
Oh, I think it's an opportunity to try things and to see how it goes. I've got no doubt it's going to be really popular. A feast of footy, like you said. I think, though, that anything that happens during this COVID period is not normal. So there's going to be some interesting innovations that will come out of it. But, there's no crowds. All the games are being played outside of Melbourne. And there's a lot of people sitting around in Melbourne in lockdown. So they're going to lap this up. It's over a 3-week period. It's going to be like State of Origin, which is always successful on a Wednesday night. So, people are in and they're watching on TV. I've got no doubt it's going to rate really well, but going forward, how that fits in with match scheduling, will crowds turn out on a Monday night or a Wednesday night regularly during the season if this was to become a regular thing, and even Thursday night football. I think I don't think we're going to be able to read into it if it's a rating success. This is going to become a thing of the future, but it's certainly an innovation that is an opportunity to test it and see what the appetite is.
Just really quickly, we've seen in the NRL a couple of almost made-for-television slots with that Friday 6 p.m. game, the Monday night game as well, where attendances aren't really at the forefront. Do you think the AFL needs a full stadium from an optics perspective a little bit more perhaps than the NRL in the way that it's shot and the way it's broadcast?
Yeah, I do think. I think that because of it's played on an oval, that the crowd is always, or the stands are always in view. So it's more noticeable in an AFL game when there aren't crowds there. And look, there's always debate in rugby league about, Monday night got done away with. Some people don't like the early Friday night game because they can't get to the games. Thursday night football gets, debated as well. So, yeah, I don't think that's really the answer.
We move to rugby league now. The worst kept secret in rugby league circles was the formalisation yesterday of the appointment of Trent Barrett as the new Canterbury Bulldogs coach. He won't move into the role until 2021, so he still stays on as an assistant at Penrith Panthers and will look to, I suppose, end his tenure there with a premiership. But he moves into a club with enormous potential, but also a huge amount of politics, a lack of success in recent seasons, and a roster that needs an overhaul. Is this a good move for Barrett, and what should his immediate priorities be in the job?
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity. Like you said, Canterbury's a super club. Yeah, there's some political issues, I suppose, which can make life difficult there. But as I said, it's a good club, really well resourced, and they're at the bottom of the table, so we can only take them up. I think the fact that Trent's not coming on board until next season it's a good opportunity for him to not sit back and watch, but he's going to be able to distance himself from some of the hard decisions that need to be made there in terms of a player roster. So Trent Barrett's not going to be there telling players, oh, sorry, we don't want you for next season, while expecting them to continue to perform. He's going to be able to do it himself or get someone else to do it for him as he shapes the roster. And he's going to be able to just focus on next season and recruitment. And that's what he needs to do. They need to build a roster. They've got Luke Thompson from the Super League has come over the front rower. They've signed Nick Kotrick yesterday. I've got no doubt Trent Barrett was an influence there, and I'm sure that there's going to be some more signings to come. Trent's very popular with players in the game. Players still remember him from his playing days as well. So I think that's really helpful.
And just on that, Kieran Foran obviously comes to the end of his contract on a big money deal through no fault of his own. Injuries have curtailed his ability to get on the field as regularly as he would have liked. He's come out and said he'd love to stay at the Bulldogs, and he is really willing to take a pretty massive pay cut to do so. Do you think he's likely to be in Barrett's plans?
Oh, I'd imagine so. Kieran Foran's a very good footballer. It's really unfortunate about the injuries, but when Kieran's on the field, you can see the direction that he gives the team. He's an experienced player. He can lead the way in defence and attack. I've got no doubt that if they can reach a deal with Kieran, they will, but they won't pay over the odds because, unfortunately, he's spent so much time off the field in recent seasons.
Staying in rugby league, and our big one today that we'll spend a little bit more time on comes from Andrew Webster in the Sydney Morning Herald. He hasn't held back calling the tug-of-war for 16-year-old talent Joseph Suaalii between rugby league and rugby union a disgusting tug-of-war. Webster refers to the fact that there's something stomach-churning about what's happening to a 16-year-old as he's being pushed and pulled by South Sydney, by Rugby Australia, and in Webster's words, by some shadowy advisors as he weighs up a monumental decision about his future. According to certain people at South, Suaalii's agreed a 3-year deal worth $3 million to join rugby union. That would be a huge amount of money for that sport to be spending with their own well-acknowledged financial challenges. According to Rugby Australia, that figure's the stuff of absolute fantasy, with highly placed sources suggesting the figure is close to 80% short of that. What are you hearing in these circles? What can we take as fact and what's fiction here, Brad?
I think the truth is probably going to lie somewhere in between, as it usually does. But no matter how you want to look at it, even at 80%, it's $200,000 a season. So it's the figure is somewhere between $200,000 a season and $1 million a season for a 16-year-old kid who's in year 11 in high school, who has done some training with South Sydney. They can't register a contract with him until he turns 17. There's talk about going to the Olympics next year. Russell Crowe's involved. It's mind-boggling. I've got no idea how a 16-year-old kid and his family his family can come to a decision or figure out what they want to do. I suppose there's worse positions to be in, but it is a tug of war, as Andrew Webster described it, and it's over potential. Like, he hasn't played an NRL game or a Super Rugby game or a game at any senior level in either code yet. Sure, he's a super talent, but obviously people see the potential, and it's not just Rugby Australia, it's not just South Sydney, but there seems to be, by all reports, there's third parties involved who are somehow able to come up with money, and I think that's probably why Rugby Australia are able to say it's nowhere near that sort of money, because they're not paying. Maybe they're not paying $1 million a year or offering $1 million a year, but someone is the total of the deals. Especially if he's prepared to walk away from a big money offer that South Sydney had made him.
Yeah, we've seen in the past Rugby Australia through the Rugby First Foundation, I think it's called, or the Australian Rugby Foundation, been able to find donors to contribute to big contracts for the likes of David Pocock and Israel Folau in years gone by. According to reports here, Rob Clark, the Rugby Australia interim chief executive, was on the phone to some senior Wallabies yesterday, stressing to them that the reported figures were not correct and kind of assuaging, some of their concerns and fears about it. Rob Clark has done a wonderful job at Rugby Australia since he went into that interim role, so you'll take him on his word there, I would imagine. Suaalii turned 17 on August the 1st, so we're going to get a conclusion to this story over the course of the next week, we would think. From there, Brad, I want to take you to a story in The Age from Greg Baum. This is one that I think if it was happening in a bigger sport would be on the front page, of every newspaper in the country. More than 20 former Australian gymnasts and coaches have taken to social media en masse to detail a gruesome history of physical, mental, and emotional abuse in the sport, which drove at least one of them to the point of suicide. We've got Commonwealth Games gold medalist Chloe Gilliland in there. And this has all come on the back of a Netflix documentary released last month called Athlete A, which follows a journalistic investigation into the assault of gymnasts in the US that led 2 years ago to the jailing for life of Dr. Larry Nassar. We've also seen, for anyone following this space, the BBC has been reporting a lot of UK gymnasts in recent weeks, speaking up about alleged abuse in their sport there as well. And now it's come to Australia, and Kitty Chiller, former chef de mission of the Australian Olympic Committee, now the CEO of Gymnastics Australia, is quoted in Baum's article as saying, we acknowledge and applaud those who've spoken up, and we acknowledge speaking up is difficult. We're here to listen and we're here to act. What is that acting going to be? What's it going to look like, Brad?
I imagine if there's an inquiry, we'll hear all sorts of allegations, mainly around, it sounds like around, things like fat shaming, a culture of fear, athletes being deprived of food. I think that we shouldn't be surprised in gymnastics. I think this is a bit of I don't know if you call it a hidden secret, an open secret. Maybe, especially, when you look at what's going on in other countries, and I suppose when I think of gymnastics, I think of the countries that were really good at one stage were Russia and the Eastern Bloc countries, and some of the things that young kids, people as young as 13, 14, competing at Olympics, and what they had to go through to put themselves in contention. And then obviously athletes from other countries like the United States or like Australia to compete had to make unbelievable sacrifices, for want of a better word, to be able to compete and to be able to put ourselves in positions like that. So I think it's probably something that's endemic, or was endemic, within the sport. And most of these athletes, we're going back to maybe 20 years ago that they're talking about those sort of issues. But that's what I suppose, like, it's an Olympic sport, and an Olympic gold medal is the highest achievement in that sport, and that's what the sort of stuff that was happening in Russia and in the Eastern Bloc countries. So I think, but the revelations when they come out, like you said, they should be front page news.
Yeah, it's fairly alarming stuff, and Kitty Chiller hasn't been in that role for a long time, so let's not lay the blame at her feet. But in saying that, she's a seasoned administrator, and you would expect that a formal review and an independent one will be called fairly shortly there, or at least in my opinion it should be. Our final story today, and we move over to the UK. Really good opinion piece from former England Test cricket captain Michael Vaughan in the Telegraph. Essentially saying that Joe Root's the captain of that England Test team, but Ben Stokes leads it in so many ways, and then affirming that he's the best player in the world. This comes on the back of the England team's second Test victory against the West Indies. Stokes scoring 176, a very patient 176 in the first innings, then promoted to open in the second innings for the first time in Test cricket when they needed quick runs, and smashing 78 not out off less than 60 balls. Chimed in with 3 wickets for the match. He averages nearly 60 in Test cricket over the past 13 months. He's averaging less than 30 or just over 30 with the ball. We saw him as the hero of the England one-day World Cup victory as well. Clearly, it's very hard to argue that he is the best cricketer in the world right now. But I want to take you back less than 2 years ago when Ben Stokes was pleading guilty to an affray charge. He was facing prison time. He was suspended from all cricket for England for a long, long time, and really at his lowest ebb. Is this one of the most remarkable transformations we've ever seen in world sport, Brad?
Yeah, it's certainly a remarkable transformation. He's a human headline, Ben Stokes. In many ways, it reminds me of, I suppose, Shane Warne's cricket career. Always in the headlines for good or for bad, off the field, on the field. But certainly on the field, he's delivering. He's a hero. It's for England, and he's certainly a key player for England. And if he can keep his nose clean off the field, I think all those things in the past will be largely forgotten and forgiven, and the focus will be on his cricket. And I thought there was a really interesting graphic that accompanied that article as well, which shows that in the last 13 months he's the third best or highest scoring batsman in the world. He's the 5th highest wicket taker, and he's number 3 for the most catches. So that backs up that suggestion that he's the best player in the world at the moment. And I think he's got a long career ahead of him, and we're going to be hearing a lot, well, not hearing a lot more of him, but we're going to be watching him play against Australia, and he's going to be probably the number one opposition player for a long time to come.
Yeah, shades of Ian both, Andrew Flintoff, but arguably probably, if he hasn't already, certainly will surpass the careers of both of those men. Ashes series, as it stands, about 18 months away, and you suspect he'll have a key role to play there when England come down under. Brad, thank you so much for your time. Great to catch up with you as always.
Thanks for having me, Pete. It's really enjoyable watching what you're doing.
For those of you watching or listening for the first time, it's the Best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. You can get this via Facebook, YouTube. You can also listen to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. The show's out before 8 o'clock every morning to make sure that you're upskilled and in the know about what's happening in the world of sport as you head into your day. We'll catch up tomorrow. Looking forward to having Courtney Walsh from The Australian on for the first time. Have a great day, Brad. Take care.
Same to you. See ya.